Thank you for helping us celebrate MFA's 100th anniversary. MFA was born of farm family need. At the beginning of the 20th century, farmers and ranchers needed ready markets. They needed fair weights and measures. They needed roads. They produced commodities enough to feed a growing nation. Infrastructure was non-existent. William Hearth took notice, and Hearth had a voice. A magazine called the Missouri Farmer and Breeder, and Hearth had a vision. Hearth's vision was to convince farmers to build an economic powerhouse through the simple concept of self-interest. He focused on farmers helping themselves. After reading Hearth's article in the Missouri Farmer, Aaron Bechtel, a farmer and stockman just north of Brunswick, convinced 6 neighbors to meet at the newcomer schoolhouse. The group pooled an order for 1,150 pounds of penitentiary binder twine and sent it to Hearth. It was the first order he received and counted as the creation of what would become one of the 3 largest cooperatives in the nation. The newcomer schoolhouse farm club savings of $400 lent credence to the cooperative concept, and the farm club idea swept the countryside like a prairie fire. Within 5 years, farm families created 1,000 farm clubs. Hearth traveled the countryside speaking to farm club after farm club. Local buildings couldn't contain the crowds. Newspapers described small-town traffic jams, farm families waiting hours for entrance, and a rural audience enthralled. Farm clubs structured meetings, printed songbooks, formed a women's organization called Women's Progressive Farmers Association. Hundreds of clubs held debates, organized fishing trips, assembled parades several miles long, and hosted barbecues. With Hearth behind the scenes urging them on, conducting business prospectuses and studies, negotiating contracts, dealing with lenders and vendors, farm clubs and the farmers and ranchers who formed them organized exchanges, then structures to collect, market, and distribute their products. MFA differed from other cooperatives in that it was specifically an economic agency. The objective was to secure a fair profit for the fruit of the farmer's sweat and toil. All other activities were to be subservient to this ideal. By 1920, just 6 short years, farm families had created more than 200 MFA exchanges, which accounted for 100 grain elevators, 150 livestock shipping associations, and poultry and egg processing plants at Springfield, Medill, and St. Joseph. By 1929, MFA had formed MFA Oil Company to meet farmer needs of petroleum products. By the early 1930s, farm clubs totaled almost 2,500, which operated 375 exchanges and elevators. MFA had central produce plants, creameries, livestock shipping associations, livestock commission companies, a grain commission company, a purchasing department, and produce sales agencies. All told, these fledgling creations dedicating themselves to MFA were generating gross sales of more than $100 million. MFA focused, too, on improving farm life. MFA farmers sponsored a school bill that guaranteed 8 months of school and placed a high school education within reach of every farm boy and girl in Missouri. They pushed for and received state legislation authorizing farm-to-market roads. Hearth died in 1940 and was replaced by MFA Vice President Fred V. Hinkle of Robertsville, Missouri. And Hinkle thought big. Under Hinkle's leadership, MFA would build a business volume unequaled as well as a national power structure unique in U.S. agriculture. Farm families flocked to MFA. More than 325 units of the association reached across the state. MFA added feed mills, poultry and egg plants, dairy plants, as well as tire and recapping facilities. And still, MFA under Hinkle expanded across the spectrum of agriculture in insurance, crops, breeding, plant foods, and livestock. The tradition continued in interregional associations and grain facilities. By the 1980s, an agricultural depression would plague the nation, slow growth, and constrict operations. But controlled by farmers, a strong board of directors, Ray Young, Eric Thompson, and Bud Frew, MFA emerged as a healthy, well-managed enterprise, positioned for continued growth through expanding MFA Agri-Services operations. By pioneering precision ag and health track, MFA continued its innovation. MFA formed joint ventures in critical business operations, expanded buying groups, and created LLCs and private enterprises through the foresight of a strong board and MFA president, Don Copenhaver. And still, MFA moved forward with one thought foremost in mind: the economic position of the farm and ranch families who owned it. And today, again, with a strong board and President Bill Streeter, MFA keeps adding to its century of accomplishment. With a proud past and an even brighter future, MFA Incorporated works at the direction and for the benefit of those who feed and clothe the nation. You, our farm families. It's a tradition MFA upholds, and a tradition your cooperative will continue.
Dad, what's farming going to be like in the next 100 years?
At MFA, we're made for agriculture. Let's start the next 100 years.